May is Military Appreciation Month, and mentors are needed to help veterans transition to civilian life. Nearly 200,000 men and women will leave the United States military service this year. And I have two guests with me this morning. Brigadier General Mike Eastman. He is the executive director of the Onward Ops Military Transition Support Program, and Andrea McCarren, who is the president of the PenFed Foundation. General Eastman, let me start with you. You've had 6 combat deployments. What is it like transitioning back from that to here in the United States?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a challenge, right? But I don't think that it's necessarily tied to combat experience or combat deployments. It's really about leaving a very structured and regimented organization with sort of a common sense of bonding and mission and purpose, and then stepping into an environment as a veteran and as a civilian where you're leaving that behind. I think that's where most veterans struggle. I wouldn't necessarily correlate it to the number of deployments, although for many of our veterans, that number is, probably unacceptably high in terms of the number of tours they've done. But it's really more about a cultural change and a loss of identity that makes transition challenging for many.
How much of the multiple deployments is due to the fact that it's a volunteer military as opposed to when the draft was in effect?
Yeah, great question. And I'm not sure that I'm necessarily equipped to answer it. I would say that um, probably the volume of deployments that we see right now, part of that is because they are shorter. It's once upon a time, as you know, you would deploy to the war, you would spend 4 years there, the war would be over, and you would come back. But now, because we're trying to limit the time away that people spend, deployment cycles have much shorter, which causes repeated turns as the conflicts that we engage in, still in many cases in recent history take a couple of decades. So, what maybe my grandfather or great grandfather would have said, I had one tour, he would fail to mention that that was 4.5, 5 years long.
Andrea, let me ask you about the PenFed Foundation. Why did you partner with Onward Ops?
The PenFed Foundation exists to empower veterans as they make that important transition from the military to becoming community assets in the civilian world. I'm also the proud daughter of a late Air Force general, so that's kind of the world I know, and I now have become a staunch advocate for veterans because they are resilient, they are natural-born leaders, they have this extraordinary skill set, and I also believe in the inherent goodness of Americans. All we are looking for is volunteers willing to give a few hours a week to a veteran to ensure their success. And succeeding veterans is good for all of America. And you come from a military family as well, so you understand some of the challenges. And we truly believe that if we are proactive, if we set up transitioning veterans with one-on-one hometown mentors, they'll have that support system that prevents some of the more challenging issues down the road. Homelessness, substance abuse, military suicide. If we can get to them before they separate from the military, give them more confidence, and give them that structure in the civilian world, they will succeed.
How much did your dad talk about his military service, Andrea?
Such a great question. Very, very little.
My dad, too. My dad served at the end of World War II, and even though he saw no action whatsoever, he rarely spoke about it. He would tell me about the ships that he was on. I'd hear stories about the aircraft carrier that he was on and what have you. And there's a picture of him with a 45 strapped to his side. Never mentioned it, didn't talk about it. His dad, my grandfather, was also in the Navy. Never once did he mention anything about World War I. And my maternal grandfather passed away before I was born, so I never got to know him. But I do know that he was wounded. It says on his military discharge papers, he was slightly wounded. If you consider being gassed and having shrapnel in your body from grenades being slightly wounded, then he was slightly wounded.
Wow, I do think that's a generational thing not to discuss it. And I think that's where we really have evolved and advanced. It's okay to talk about some of the challenges. And I think that's a real positive. And the PenFed Foundation Onward Ops partnership really paves the way for that open dialogue. And we just are looking for mentors, and we're also trying to spread the word so transitioning service members know about the great innovative program that is Onward Ops.
General Eastman, let me ask you, I don't know if you watched Masters of the Air or not. That was on the 9-part series.
I did not.
No, I haven't either.
There,
Have you?
it's yes, I have. It's wonderful. It's so well done, and it's about the 8th Air Force. My dad's first cousin, we have a personal connection to this. My dad's first cousin was a bombardier in a B-17. He was shot down shortly after D-Day in 1944, and he spent the last 11 months in a prisoner of war camp. That camp was in the movie. It was in the series, and I had a chance to read his diaries. And a lot of what was in his diaries managed to be included. He's not mentioned at all in the film series whatsoever, but a lot of what he experienced was in there. And all I could think about, because the final episode is everybody coming home. And all I could think about was, because I know some of the story of his transition when he came back to the United States, but I'm watching all of these men who have flown in World War II, 8th Air Force, what have you, all of these missions, and you know what they've gone through, and they're coming home. And all I could think about was that transition. Like, all of a sudden, here I am, I'm home. Now what?
Yeah, I know that. I think there's a commonality there. Certainly, the way we've received our veterans back after the various conflicts has changed over time. I think we're doing a much better job now. But I would say that, on the one hand, every service member's transition into veteran status is unique. Some saw combat, some did not. Some have medical challenges, some do not. But what do they share in common? They all really want to come back and be contributing. They want to leverage the skills and experiences that they've gained, and they can if we set them up for success, right? So I think that is that commonality that we want to focus on. Yeah. So although it's funny, I think about my dad coming back from Vietnam, and transitioning. And then I try and juxtapose that with my own return from Iraq or Afghanistan. What's the first thing you realize? It's not natural to stay up 22 hours a day. First thing. And second thing is you don't really have to organize every single thing you do over those 22 hours, right? Which is the first thing that my family snaps me back into very quickly. So yeah, I get it, right? But everyone's journey is different. But there is one thing we know, and that's with a little bit of help, they're going to have a better outcome than if they're left to navigate it on their own.
Why do you think Vietnam veterans had so much difficulty? Maybe it's because we're learning about it more, but why did it seem that they had more difficulty transitioning back?
I think that for better or for worse, public views on the war itself colored the way we treated the people that fought in that war. Unfairly, probably, to them. As you know, there was the draft. These folks were not asking necessarily to participate, but they went, they did their job to the best of their ability, and they came home. And because the public perception of the righteousness, the morality of that war wasn't necessarily where we would want it to be, or it wasn't very positive, it transferred over into the service members themselves. But as I told the soldiers and sailors and airmen that I led, really all you can do is your mission to the best of your ability. And when you're in that environment, I don't care about the political environment around me. I care about the lives and the livelihood of the service member to my left and to my right. And as long as you're doing that, you should be justifiably proud in your service.
My son has a very good friend who's been deployed a couple of times, and in fact, he's overseas right now. And he said almost that very same thing. It's not what I believe in as much as I'm serving my country, and it's very profound to hear that come from a young guy who's I think he's in his late 20s right now. Andrea, you mentioned the need for mentors. If WDHA and WMTR listeners are interested in becoming mentors, how do they do that?
We would love to have your listeners go to our website, PenFedFoundation.org. That's PenFed foundation.org, whether they want to become a mentor or explore that possibility, or whether they are a transitioning service member or have a loved one, that is, who would like to sign up free of charge to Onward Ops and become part of this innovative, groundbreaking program.
Andrea McCarren, the president of the PenFed Foundation, and Brigadier General Mike Eastman, the executive director of the Onward Ops Military Transition Support Program. Thank you both for your time this morning here on WDHA's Jersey Magazine, and best of luck with this program. This is so wonderful and so necessary.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.